Hi everyone, it's me and Pudge here. We are back with a new assignment. Got something different for you guys today. What this is going to be is a listening activity. I could just, give you some stuff to read about this story and just have you read it and answer questions. But I decided to do something different, and that's for a number of reasons. Um, what we're going to be reading, the Odyssey, is what we would call an epic poem. So it tells a very long story, and the epic poems were usually told out loud to people, kind of like a performance. Like you would just go see the poem, the poet would just kind of speak this poem, and it tells the story. And that was basically the only way that you were going to learn about the story. You had to be there, um, just listening to the poem. And that's what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to be telling you a story that comes before the story that we're going to read. So we are reading the Odyssey, and there's like a prequel to the Odyssey called the Iliad. And today I'm going to tell you the Iliad so that we know the backstory when we're ready to read the Odyssey. It's kind of like, you wouldn't want to watch Endgame without watching Infinity War. You'd be totally lost, not know what's going on. So we need to hear the story of Infinity War, which is actually called the Iliad. I actually don't have that written down. What am I doing? So we can see how that word is spelled and what I'm saying. The Iliad. So that's the story that we're going to be going over today. And what you'll see for the assignment is I have 10 questions for you. They're all about this story. So what you need to do is just listen to the story, and I will make it clear when I'm answering the questions and which answers to which questions I'm talking about at the time. So if you miss something, don't be afraid to just rewind it a little bit, see it again. I suppose you could maybe Google some of these answers instead of watching this. I don't know. But that's not as fun, and we're doing this because it's fun. You're going to have a fun time doing this. You're going to learn something new through a story. So a little bit about this story, the Iliad. It was written by a poet named Homer. Homer. So Homer, we know some things about Homer. He probably lived on an island around Greece, which is the setting of the story. An interesting thing about him, hint, hint, question number one, is that people believe that he was probably blind. Blind. So that is question number one. I'm going to do stuff like this while I'm telling the story. Tell you the answers and then tell you which questions they're answering. So he was probably blind, which is interesting for a couple reasons. He probably had a hard time supporting himself, having that disability in a time that was long, long ago. Probably found it hard to support himself. And he probably relied a lot on hearing things from other people. So he lived on an island, so it's likely that he was always in contact with people that were sailing on the seas, and they would stop at his island, and he would talk to these people and hear stories from them. And he kind of used these stories to he put them all together and created this larger story called the Odyssey. But today we're focusing on the Iliad. Let's get right into it. He says 4 minutes later, getting right into it. So the Iliad is about, takes place in a city called Troy. That's number two. The city is called Troy. So Troy is remarkable for a number of reasons. Pudge is just going to sit over there. It's no worries. We'll leave him alone. So Troy was a city. It's in present day. Right now the country is called Turkey, and it is in Europe, and that's where the city of Troy would have been. A lot of this story, there's parts of it that might have been real. There might have been a war that happened around the city. The city probably existed because they found things. Scientists have gone to that area and found things that look like they could have existed in the spot. So the city may have been a real place. Um, it's about the city of Troy. And one thing that's notable about the city of Troy is got these huge walls all around the city. There's just walls that surround the city. The city's in the middle. So anyone trying to invade wouldn't have been able to get into the city. And that's going to be important later. So remember that. Huge walls surrounding the city. So the person in charge of the city is a guy named Paris. He is the prince of Troy. Paris. So Paris, it's an interesting story. He was kind of chosen by the gods to be the leader of Troy. He wasn't supposed to be the prince or a king when he was really young, but he was found by the gods. And what they did is it all started with there were other characters and they were getting married, and so the gods all went to their wedding. The gods are important in all the Greek mythology, so the gods are going to be like characters. And if we know anything about Greek mythology, is that they didn't just believe in one god. They had many different gods that were all in charge of different things. Like the ocean would have a god, lightning had a god, love had a goddess. So all these different ideas all had some kind of god who was like a symbol of that idea. So we had there was a wedding, and a lot of the gods were there, and one of the main gods is Zeus. And what we know about Zeus is that we'll get more into Zeus in a little bit. Zeus is crazy, but he is the king of all gods, right? So that is Zeus, king of all gods. So he sent some of the goddesses to Paris because he was going to choose Paris to be the king, or he was eventually going to be in charge of Troy one day. So they sent 3 of the goddesses. There was Hera, who is the goddess of something, I don't really remember. Athena, who is the goddess of war, and Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love. I didn't write their names down. And so they're fighting over. There's like a golden apple, okay. And what happens is it's kind of like The Bachelor, where he has to choose which of those gods is going to get those goddesses that came to visit him is going to get the golden apple. So one of them is promising him, is like, if you choose me, I'm going to give you wisdom and skill. That's Hera. And then the second one, Athena, she says, if you choose me, I will give you power and you will control all of Asia. You will be in charge. And then the last one, Aphrodite, says, how about I'll make the most beautiful woman in the world fall in love with you. So Paris, he's a dummy. He picks number 3. He picks hot wife. That is his prize. Instead of, being smarter or a better warrior, or having actual power, he wants a hot wife. So he picks option 3, and that hot wife is, answer to question 4, Helen of Sparta. And Helen of Sparta is the most beautiful woman in the world. Why is she the most beautiful woman in the world? Well, has to do with where she comes from. This is where it gets weirder. It was already getting weird. It's going to get weirder. So her father is actually the god Zeus, the king of all gods. So Zeus would do this thing to where he would disguise himself as something else besides Zeus in order to go to Earth and make it with a lady and have children with a human woman. So this is one of the times that he does that in Greek mythology. There's several times, like Hercules, the strong hero is Zeus's son. So this is one of the times where he does that. He meets this woman Leda, and he wants to have a baby with her, so he disguises himself in another form. And you might be thinking, oh, he probably disguises himself as like a human man so that he can seduce this woman. He doesn't do that. Instead, he changes himself into a swan so that he can get with a human woman. I don't know why that he would do that. that seems gross and weird. If you want, you can pause this and then open up another tab and then Google search what a swan looks like. And they're frightening. They're giant birds. So why did he pick a swan? I don't know. That's weird. So this he had a baby, Swan Zeus, and Leda had this baby, and it became Helen of Sparta. Helen. Da, da, da. So what we know about Helen is there was a contest. There's always contests to see who the girl is going to marry. It's a big part of all these stories in this. There's always a contest to see who the woman is going to marry, and the winner of that contest is Menelaus. Menelaus gets to marry Helen. So Paris isn't even in this situation yet. It's Menelaus, and he wins a contest. He like donates the most oxen or whatever, gets to marry Helen of Sparta. But there was this deal with the golden apple and everything. So Paris is actually going to fall in love with her. So how does he do that? Well, he just straight up goes into Sparta. Sparta. You may have seen the movie 300, where it's a bunch of warrior dudes. No one wears a shirt, and they just go and fight another war. We're not going to talk about that movie or that story of Sparta. We're just going to talk about Sparta as a place, and that's where Helen is, and she's going to be married to Menelaus, and she's going to be the queen. But Paris just goes there and kidnaps her. While he's doing that, she gets shot with an arrow by Cupid. So if you know from music, when they talk about Cupid, what happens is if Cupid shoots you with his arrow, then you fall in love with whoever you see. So that happens to Helen. Helen is shot by Cupid's arrow, and she falls in love with Paris because of that. So we got Helen and Paris. So Helen gets kidnapped, and they take her back to Troy. Paris takes her back to Troy, where he's going to marry her and be the Prince of Troy. So because of that, the Spartans say that they're going to go to war with Troy to get her back. So they got to go to Troy, and they need an army. So they got to get everybody together. So who do they get together? A couple of people. One of them is the main character of the Odyssey, Odysseus. Odysseus, in some versions of the story, he really wants to go to war, and then another one, he doesn't want to go to the war, so he pretends to be crazy, and they show up and ask him, "Hey, will you go to war?" He's like, "I can't, I'm all crazy, man." And so they say, "Oh yeah." So they take his newborn son, Telemachus, and they put him in front of like a plow, and he's like plowing, and he was about to like cut into his son. They put him there, so he has to realize, okay, I can't kill my son, which means I'm not crazy, which means I can go to war. I guess I'll go to war instead of kill my son. So that's how they get Odysseus to go to war. And then there's another guy that they get to go to war. He is the most powerful warrior in all of Egypt. He is the answer to number 5, and his name is Achilles. Achilles. So Achilles, really strong warrior. And what happened with him is he's also not entirely human, because his mom is a sea nymph, which means she is a magic creature that lives in the sea. Her name is Thetis. Thetis, the sea nymph. She is Achilles' mother. And what happened when Achilles was really young, she wanted him to be immortal. She wanted him to be really strong, so he couldn't even be killed. So what she did is she takes him to the river that leads to the underworld, and the river is called Styx. And what she does is she takes him to the river Styx, and she picks him up by the ankle, and she dunks him in the river water of the river Styx. She dunks him in, holds him by the ankle. That's important for a couple reasons. Number one, that's not how we hold a baby. You gotta cradle the head, gentle rocking, like this is the baby's head here. You don't just pick a baby up by the ankle. Bad move. Bad move. It offended Pudge. He got up and walked away. So, number one, don't hold the baby like that. Number two, what that did is any part of him that touched the water was made invincible. So you couldn't stab him through his arms because his arms got dunked in the water or his head. So most of him is invincible. He is mostly immortal. But if you remember, she was holding him by the ankle, so the ankle didn't actually go in the water. That's going to be important later. Remember that. Ankle did not go into the water. Ankle not covered by this magic power here. So, so they all go to war. They start fighting for like 10 years. Well, the war lasts 10 years, like 9 years where there's just fighting and there's not a lot of important stuff. I've already been talking for about 15 minutes and we're only about halfway done. So I'm going to pick it up a little bit. There's a whole bunch of stuff, like there's a plague. Achilles gets one of his girlfriends stolen. He has to kill somebody there. There's now it gets to the point where the Trojans are fighting the Greeks and they're like in the Greeks camp. So the Greeks had to be like stationed outside of the city, couldn't get into the city. Walls are too high, no way to get in there. So they're outside of the city. And then the Trojans, by the way, Trojans are the people from Troy. People from Troy are called Trojans. So I'm going to be saying that a lot, the word Trojans. That means people from Troy, nothing else. Nothing funny about that word. So the Trojans, they go up to the Greeks' camp, and Achilles, because one of the kings stole his girlfriend, Achilles just decided he's not going to fight anymore. So he kind of gives up on the war. And then he's got a friend named Patroclus. And Patroclus takes all, he gives Achilles, remember, strongest man except for that ankle part. He gives Patroclus all of his armor and stuff and tells him, okay, wear all my armor into war and just fight. They'll think that you are me, but whatever, just go out there and fight. And then he does that, and he does pretty good. He gets all the way to the wall, and they're retreating, and he's about to maybe even get over the wall somehow or whatever, and he gets killed. And the guy who kills him is another main character, and the answer to number 6. Are we on the right one? What happened to who is Paris's brother? Yeah, so the guy that kills Patroclus is Paris's brother, Hector. Remember, Hector is the brother of Paris. Paris is the guy who is in charge of Troy. Hector is his brother. So we got Hector is Paris's brother. Answer to number 6. So Hector kills Achilles' like best friend. So Achilles is like, all right, it's back on. Now I'm back in the war. Now we're gonna fight again. So what does he do? He goes back to Troy. He's about to get to the walls, and everybody pretty much goes. All the Trojans, they go back through the walls of Troy to get back into the city to safety because Achilles is trying to kill people, but Hector gets tricked. And has to be outside. He gets locked outside. One of the gods like tricks him or something. I don't remember. But then what happens then? Achilles kills Hector and drags his body behind his chariot. I got a lot written up here, so I'm going to leave this one on screen for a little bit. The chariot, and you could probably Google image this if you want to see what this looks like. It's like a little wagon, and it gets pulled by a horse in front of it. And it's got 2 wheels, and then the horse cart is in front of it, and then usually somebody's on there with like a bow and arrow or a spear or a sword, and it's just, yeah, fighting like that. So a great deal of disrespect done to Hector. Got his body dragged behind that chariot. So the Trojans, they don't really like that. Not one bit. So the father of Hector, his name is Priam. So he goes to Achilles and he's like, hey, I really want the body back because that's my son. I know we're at war. and we don't get along, but I want that body back, please. So we can just maybe call a truce right now while I bury this body. And that's kind of like the end of the Iliad story, but that's not really where it ends because the war is still going on. Paris is still alive. Remember, Helen is why this war started because she got kidnapped. She is still in the city. The king Menelaus, the king of Sparta, is still trying to get her back. So they need a plan to end this war. Or actually, before that, before they come up with a plan to end the war. We got Achilles. Remember him? Remember I said before that he was dunked in the river by the heel, mostly immortal, but not totally because of the heel part didn't get touched by the water. What happens to him? Okay, how about Zeus, our main god, king of gods, decides that Achilles, his time is up. He's killed so many Trojan people that now it's his turn to die. So what happens? They're fighting. They're trying to get into the city again. And remember about the heel. Well, what happens is Paris shoots Achilles in the heel with an arrow. So that one part of him that was weak, that could be shot, he gets shot in it. So the gods help guide the arrow right into his heel. So Achilles gets shot in the only part of him that was weak to anything. So have you ever heard like, oh, that's my Achilles heel? It's my one weakness. It's talking about this story where this guy literally had just one weakness and it was literally on his heel. So he's dead. And the Greeks are running out of ideas because they're trying to get into the city. They're still trying to get back Helen, take her back to Sparta, end the war. So they have to come up with a plan. And here's the plan. And the plan is made by our main guy now, because the other guy's dead. This is Odysseus. This is who we're going to be learning a lot more about in the story of the Odyssey. So Odysseus comes up with the plan. What they're going to do is they're going to build a giant horse out of wood. Build a giant horse out of wood. And here's kind of what it looks like. I drew this. It's not a good drawing, but you can kind of see what we're talking about here. That's a horse. And then the bottom, it's got wheels. So the horse is just like you push the horse on wheels. It doesn't work like a real horse. Just got to wheel it in there. But in the inside, it's all empty and hollow. And what they do is they have all the Greek soldiers get inside this giant horse. So then they have everybody get inside the horse, and then they write a note on the outside of the horse, and the note's like, hey, we went back home. We're the Greeks. We went back home to Greece. War's over. Please enjoy this horse. You guys win. And then the Trojans open up the door to the city, and they see this horse, and they think, oh, cool, free horse. Let's bring it inside, and then we'll see what we're going to do with it. So question 9 was, how do they get inside the city? The Greeks hide inside a wooden horse. The Greeks hide inside a wooden horse. So the Trojans take the horse into the city, and they're celebrating because they think they just won the war. Because the Greeks, they look outside, there's no Greeks anymore. There used to be a lot of Greeks, and now they're not there. They're not there. All that's there is a horse. They think they won. They're partying up, drinking a little wine, having a good time and everything. And then, the night comes, they just pass out, and that's when the Greeks come out of the horse. So they come out of the horse and they're inside the city. So the thing they were trying to do the whole time, get inside the city, they finally found a way to do it. So they get out the horse and they just start killing everybody, destroying the city, and just like really rough stuff. Slavery was a thing back in this time, and that was what would happen after a war. Is they would take the prisoners and they would become slaves. So they took even some of the royalty from Troy. They took some of those people and made them their slaves. So that's how the war was over. I think Paris is already dead. I forget how he died. Nothing really remarkable about that. I don't even think a main character killed him. So they're gonna take, but what they finally did the thing they were trying to do in the war, which was get Helen back. So Menelaus, the guy from the beginning, he takes Helen back to Sparta. Everybody's pretty much ready to go home, and some people pretty much just get home with no problem. But here's what happens. Odysseus, remember the main guy, the guy that came up with the horse plan. He's kind of feeling himself after his great idea of making the horse and winning the war. So he kind of is bragging about it. You know, they're getting on the boat, and he's like, you know what? I came up with that idea all with my brain. I didn't need any gods. I didn't need any of the other soldiers or anything to help me. It was my idea, and it worked, and we won, and I'm great, and I'm smarter than anybody, and I don't really even need the gods to win the war because I won the war with my mind. And that was a mistake because the gods heard him, especially he was at the sea, and the god of the sea is Poseidon, and he is an angry jerk, and he decides to make it very difficult for Odysseus to get home. And he puts a curse on him so that he cannot return home. So once again, if we didn't see how to spell that, that is Poseidon. You can pause it if you need to. And that's it. That's the story of the Iliad. I've been telling a story for about 26 minutes, and we just finished it. We can quickly review some of the answers here, starting at the beginning. Number one, Homer was probably blind. Then we had number two, the city is called Troy. And then the Prince of Troy is named Paris. And then we got for question four, most beautiful woman in the world, who he steals is Helen of Sparta. Then we got the most powerful warrior in all of Greece is Achilles. And then Paris's brother is named Hector. And then for number seven, what happens with Hector? Achilles kills Hector and drags his body behind his chariot. That's for number seven. Then after that, we got question eight. Question eight was Paris. What does it say? Paris shoots Achilles in the heel with an arrow. Then we got number nine is the Greeks hide inside a wooden horse. And finally, question 10, the answer is Poseidon, the god of the sea. So that basically sets up what's going to happen in the Odyssey. The Odyssey is about Odysseus and his men trying to get home. And that's not easy because they keep getting lost in all these little misadventures. Sometimes it's Odysseus's fault, sometimes it's his men's fault, sometimes it's the gods are doing stuff to mess him up. Yeah, that's basically it. So we're going to start, when we get into the Odyssey, we're going to most likely just going to be doing a lot more reading instead of listening to me tell a story for a half hour. I did not know that that's how long this is going to be. Anyway, that's about it. This assignment is going to be due next week. As I'm recording it, it's Tuesday, posting it on Tuesday. If you have any questions about this assignment or anything else, please reach out to me through email. That's about it. Bye.